Module 9. Rio markers are a different system. A bilateral donor may co-finance an operation and may ask for Rio markers alongside the MDB amount. These markers are not a variation on the tracking already done. They answer a different question. They serve a different reporting system. They produce a different kind of output. The OECD Rio markers for Climate Handbook governs them. The handbook carries no version number and no date on its title page. Cite it as the current handbook. Never attach a date it does not state. Start with what a marker is. Official development finance activities are reported to the DAC creditor reporting system. These activities are screened and marked. An activity is marked as targeting the UNFCCC as a principal objective for a score of 2, as a significant objective for a score of 1, or as not targeting the convention for a score of 0. The handbook says these marks indicate the policy objectives of members' development finance activities. Policy objectives are the focus here. The marks do not indicate amounts. That distinction is the whole module. The handbook provides the mitigation marker definition. An activity should be classified as climate change mitigation related if it contributes to the objective of stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. This is achieved by promoting efforts to reduce or limit greenhouse gas emissions and by promoting efforts to enhance greenhouse gas sequestration. The criteria for eligibility list 4 routes. The activity needs only one of them. The first is contributing to the mitigation of climate change by limiting anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases, including gases regulated by the Montreal Protocol. The second is contributing to the protection or enhancement of greenhouse gas sinks and reservoirs. The third is contributing to the integration of climate change concerns with the recipient country's development objectives through institution building, capacity development, strengthening the regulatory and policy framework, and research. The fourth is contributing to developing countries' efforts to meet their obligations under the Convention. The handbook then states the principal test. The activity will score principal objective if it directly and explicitly aims to achieve one or more of those 4 criteria. The handbook provides the adaptation marker definition. An activity should be classified as adaptation-related if it intends to reduce the vulnerability of human or natural systems to the current and expected impacts of climate change, including climate variability. The reduction is achieved by maintaining or increasing resilience through an increased ability to adapt to or absorb climate change stresses, shocks, and variability, and by helping reduce exposure to them. The handbook adds that this encompasses information and knowledge generation, capacity development, planning, and the implementation of adaptation actions. The eligibility criteria will sound familiar. The first is setting out the context of climate vulnerability clearly, using a robust evidence base from existing analyses and reports or original bespoke assessment. The second is stating the intent to address the identified risks, vulnerabilities, and impacts in project documentation. The third is demonstrating a clear and direct link between the identified risks and the specific project activities. That is the same 3-part logic as the MDB adaptation methodology. The structure of the evidence is genuinely similar, and evidence assembled for one can support the other, but the output is not the same. This is where consultants overclaim. The scoring definitions are precise and worth knowing exactly. An activity is marked principal, for a score of 2, when the objective is explicitly stated as fundamental in the design of the activity or as the fundamental motivation for it. Promoting the objective will be stated in the activity documentation as one of the principal reasons for undertaking it. An activity is marked significant, for a score of 1, when the objective is explicitly stated but is not the fundamental driver. The activity has other prime objectives, but it has been formulated or adjusted to help meet the relevant climate concerns. The word adjusted is doing familiar work. A significant marker describes something close to what the MDB methodology calls a Type 1 activity. The handbook gives the operative test in plain words. The activity would not have been funded but for that objective. The activity would not have been designed that way, but for that objective. That is a counterfactual test. Remove the climate objective. The question is whether this activity would still have been funded and whether it would still have been funded in this form. If the answer is no, the marker is principal. If the answer is yes, the marker is not principal. A score of 0 means the activity was examined and found not to target the objective in any significant way. Note that carefully. The activity was examined but found not to target. A 0 is a recorded finding. It is not the absence of an assessment. An activity that was never screened is not a 0. Recording it as one asserts work that was not done. Mitigation and adaptation are marked separately. An activity can carry both markers when both objectives are explicit and each passes its own test. Now comes the part that matters most for a consultant. This is where a marker gets turned into money it does not represent. A RIO marker is not a climate finance amount. It carries no percentage. The handbook defines a policy objective. It does not define a share of finance. A provider may convert marker scores into monetary estimates. That conversion comes from the provider's own written policy, its coefficient, its effective date, its rules. Practices differ between D.A.C. members. There is no universal rule that a significant marker equals 40%. There is no universal rule that a principal marker equals 100. The correct sequence is to score the marker against the handbook's tests, then ask the provider for its current written conversion policy. If there is no written policy, the work stops at the marker score. The reporting focal point receives a clarification request, not a figure, constructed by the consultant. An activity may carry both markers. In that case, guard the aggregation. Two markers describe one activity. Adding two converted percentages can report more finance than the contribution contained. No methodology permits creating money by describing an activity twice. Finally, keep the RIO output structurally separate from the MDB amount. The MDB calculation works at the level of eligible activities or components. RIO marking describes the objective of a reported activity under the D.A.C. system. Both can be correct at once. Both can give different answers. They are answers to different questions. Presenting one as validation of the other is the error this module exists to prevent. Module 10 covers the boundary, the reconciliation, and the trail that lets a reviewer reproduce all of it.